Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar, and Zafar Iqbal Sahib. It is Friday, the 23rd of February 2024, and I'm your host, Abdul Akbar, beaming out to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas tonight, and also to the good people of Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, and the Midlands through our partner stations across the nations. If you haven't heard, Shamima Begum has lost her bid to regain UK citizenship. The Court of Appeal ruling means the 24-year-old must remain in Syria. And if you recall, the government stripped her citizenship on national security grounds in 2019. Now, Miss Begum left London 9 years ago, aged 15, to travel to Syria and join the Islamic State group, or the so-called Islamic State. And now the ruling by 3 appeal judges was unanimous. It can still be challenged by her in the Supreme Court by Miss Begum. And her solicitor is saying that her legal team was not going to stop fighting until she gets justice and until she is safely back home. I don't know about you, but if there was a 15-year-old, I know Shamima is of Bangladeshi origin, but I'm just wondering, I really do wonder if Mr. Sajid Javid, who was the Home Secretary at the time, who stripped her of citizenship, I just wonder if he would have done the same if Shamima was from an English origin background. In other words, if she was white, I wonder if they would have done that, because I'm pretty sure, having been aged 15 and she was, groomed, because she said she was groomed, and all the experts are saying that Shamima was groomed, I'm pretty sure that if Shamima happened to be a white Caucasian girl, they would have said, oh, well, she was groomed and etc., etc. Let's bring her back home. Yes, let's punish her for what she's done and the mistakes she's made. But why on earth strip her of her British citizenship? It's an opening of the door for maybe even you and me, God forbid. How dare they? How can they do this to somebody who went there when she was not even classed as an adult? She was 15, for goodness sake. The Supreme Court, though, and those judges have been unanimous in their verdict, citing, one of the things they're citing is national security. What's a 24-year-old going to do to national security? I don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. What do you reckon? 01582 481 822. Shamima Begum has lost her appeal against a decision to revoke her UK citizenship. And remember, that decision to revoke her UK citizenship was by none other than Sajid Javid, the former Home Secretary, who clearly, in my eyes anyway, did this to show how loyal he was to the conservative population of this country, and the fact that he had nothing to do with Muslims or Pakistan or Bangladesh or any other country whatsoever. He simply was bending over to the right-wing elements of his party by making this unprecedented move. Remember, not many people have had their citizenship stripped, and Shamima is one of very few people, if not the only person that I actually know of, that's had their citizenship stripped in this manner, especially as a 15-year-old traveling to Syria, to the so-called Islamic State, being groomed online and then going off with 3 of your friends without the permission of your parents. Surely she should be able to get back her citizenship, even though she is of Bangladeshi origins. Unacceptable. What do you reckon? 01582 481 822. I'd like to hear from you on tonight's program. We will be talking about topics that involve all of you. What do you make of the Shamima Begum story? Do you think she should get her citizenship back? Or do you think the Court of Appeal was correct in continuing to revoke her UK citizenship? Zafar Sahib, what say you on this topic?
Assalamu alaikum. This is, I think, what you said. I think is quite right. It is a case of grooming. It's a double tragedy, because I think Assassin was groomed. Her emotions towards a particular cause of misused, abused. The thought that comes to my mind is that we hear stories of abuse in the UK of a different type. Grooming. And
grooming gangs. A lot of people say grooming gangs are actually of Muslim origin, Pakistani origin. They're not. The actual statistics show that the majority of grooming gangs, statistically, factually, are white.
That's right, yeah. Victims of those are given some support, whereas in this case, like you say, for purely political reasons, a young person was deprived of, I guess, the rest of their life, basically, living in strange surroundings, away from her family. So I think politics of populism here, I think we succeeded. But then again, I think the courts are going by the law, and the laws have been framed on the back of emotions, extreme emotions, basically, right? So I think it's a tragedy all the way through.
It is. I mean, if you look at the extent she's gone to as well, Shamima Begum, I mean, she really has changed her appearance. She no longer wears a hijab. I mean, she never wore a hijab when she left the country when she was 15. You could argue she was radicalized, groomed, whatever you want to call it, when she was with the so-called Islamic State. And I think she even got married and had a child. She lost the child as well. Children, yeah. So that she's been through an experience, let's just say. And over the last 9 years, this is somebody who clearly has had a very disturbed teenage, childhood. And for her to travel the distance she did, she's clearly been very disturbed. And I don't think it's fair that the courts are not taking this into account and still citing her, a young woman now, as a national security risk. I just don't buy it. This is not like, if you remember Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, the so-called shoe bomber, I mean, he actually tried to ignite his shoes in an aircraft. Shamima Begum has done no such thing. All Shamima Begum has done, to our public knowledge, is made the decision to join a prescribed organization, a banned group, and I don't think it's right. And she made that decision not when she was an adult, but actually when she was 15 years of age. 01582 481 822. What do you reckon, listeners? What's your take? Shamima Begum Day lost an appeal against the decision to revoke her UK citizenship. What are your thoughts on this topic? Was the Court of Appeal right? Was Sajid Javid correct to take away her citizenship? Or should they do the right thing, which is what I'm suggesting is the right thing, and give her back her citizenship and let her be tried for her crimes, if any, in a UK court? Right now, she's in Syria. Right now, as far as I'm concerned,
the story is a little bit deeper as well, because there was a connection with Canadian Secret Service, basically. Secret Service, that's right. There's some sort of link. She may have been groomed or facilitated by Canadian Secret Service to actually travel to Syria. So she's not just a victim of random grooming. She appears to be being groomed by Secret Services, basically, to perform a particular service. Now, I can guess she's a threat to security because she may have stories to tell in a UK court, which may embarrass the government.
It may embarrass even the British government. It could be argued. Potentially, we don't know the actual details of that, but clearly we've seen governments in the past try to prevent, and we know Mozambique, for example, the former Guantanamo Bay detainee, famous for being incarcerated after the 9/11 attacks. It turned out he was incarcerated in the most horrific ways, was subjected to and witnessed some horrific abuse, which he shared in his book, Enemy Combatant. And if you haven't read that, this is a really interesting read. But there's a wider implication here, because if they can strip Shamima of her citizenship when she made a stupid decision of joining a prescribed organization, traveling when she was 15, then what can they do to you and me? What can the government, what rules can they create?
The law under which she's been, her citizens been taken away, is actually on the statute, and it can affect any one of us. It's up to the discretion of the Home Secretary. If the Home Secretary decides that because we've committed a crime or we're guilty of some crime, etc., the Home Secretary can decide to revoke all of our citizens.
And this is where,
even on the basis that we may have a right to another citizenship elsewhere.
This is it, you see. So you're mentioning a really interesting point, Zafar, because a lot of us may have decided to create what we call, in Pakistan at least, a Nadla card, or an identity card, or a dual nationality with our countries of origin, where our parents came from effectively, for reasons of inheritance or for reasons of, acquiring property, or whatever it might be. If you want to buy property, for example, in Pakistan, Bangladesh, or any of the countries that we're from, in order to ensure that transaction happens in a safe way and that the property remains in your name and there's no fraud, you need to be a citizen of that country. Very few countries, for example, if you go to the United Arab Emirates and you buy an apartment or a house or a villa, if you're lucky enough to buy a villa in Dubai, you don't need to be a citizen of Dubai. God forbid, they will never let you become a citizen in the first place. You can become a resident, but it's not compulsory for you to become a resident to own a property in Dubai in stipulated areas. However, if you want to own in Pakistan, and if you want to own reliably with the ability to be able to then write a will and then pass your property and your assets on to your children or family members, you ideally need to become a citizen. So a lot of us, what I'm trying to say, are actually dual nationals, right? And if you are a dual national,
it doesn't matter. The latest provision of the law says
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if you're eligible for
whether you have that card or not.
Whether you have that card or not. If you're eligible because your parents or grandparents or you have a lineage, then and you commit crimes and the house actually thinks that crime is serious enough
to kick you out.
Let's give you an example. Out of the 300,000 people that were tested last weekend before in London, Palestine, 3 were picked out by whoever to be wearing some sort of symbol of some sort, right? Who was supportive of Hamas, right? Or deemed to be supportive of Hamas. And they were then picked out, tried, and convicted of terrorism charges, right? And one of those happens to be a Palestinian refugee. Now, what they're trying to do, or what certain groups are calling for, is that she basically is deported on the basis that she's been convicted of a terrorism offense. And that terrorism offense was a symbol that was worn on the back of a...
That's scary, right?
That is scary. And we're living in a democracy, right?
It's almost, have you seen that film V is for Vendetta? Right, when V, who happens to be somebody who stands for justice, but it shows a world that has really become anti-everything, including anti-Muslim, and they actually show the Quran locked up and somebody secretly keeping a copy of the Quran. And I don't think we're there yet, right? We're not in a position, alhamdulillah, we're in a position where we can pray and go to the mosque. But I don't think we should even have to feel like that, Prasad, because I was born and raised here. I have a British passport. I have way more affiliation, 99% of my affiliation to this country. I spent 99% of my life in this country. I shouldn't have to fear that my citizenship, where I was born and where I grew up, schools that I went to, universities that I went to, can be revoked by some random individual who happens to be Home Secretary. But that's a scary thought, and it really does. People in my family have always been saying, just keep your connections back home. You never know when you're going to need to eject. And that's a scary thought, because I've always said to myself, actually, no, what do you mean back home? This is home, UK, Luton, wherever you live, Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby, Peterborough, Midland, wherever you are, wherever you live, it's home. But then the implications of what we're saying are that if, for example, if for some reason you happen to, by will or accident, happen to wear a symbol that the government at the time, or the police at the time, or the law at the time doesn't like any longer, they could find a reason to kick you out of the country. And that's a really interesting place to be. What do you reckon, listeners? 01582 481822. And remember, this is all on the back of the Shamima Begum story, but I also want to go on another story, which was also the news this week, and Sky News covered it extensively, as they did the anti-Semitism topic last week. And I remember talking about this last week to all of you, which was, we're hearing a lot about anti-Semitism, quite rightly. We should be hearing about that, because not in the way that it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, but it's good that we're hearing about it and that we can do something about it as a community, as a nation. But I also said that we're not hearing enough about the Islamophobia taking place, because anti-Muslim hate in the UK has more than tripled in the 4 months since the Hamas attacks, according to Tel Mama, which has documented over 2,000 Islamophobic incidents between October and February. But to actually talk more about this, and someone who's been a pivotal person in reporting this from the charity, I'm delighted to be joined by Sister Iman Atta. She's been on this program before, and we're lucky to have her again on the program. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Walaikum salam.
Thanks for joining us. I've got a bit of an echo coming through, so I'm going to try to ask the studio to remove that echo and then come back to you and try it again. So studio, if you can try to remove that echo from our Zoom call with Sister Atta, I would be very grateful. But one thing we fail to remember, listeners, is that yes, there are anti-Semitic incidents have been increasing. And I will say that the Israeli and Jewish lobby in the UK have done a great job in bringing that to the forefront. And one of my disappointments has been, what about the Islamophobia that's increased? Because my own daughters who wear hijab, my wife who wears hijab, I know other members of my family who wear hijab have been subjected to Islamophobic hate crimes as well over the last few months. And I think that's very close to home. And I do think to myself, what about them? Are they being recorded? And it's really important, listeners, 01582 481 822, whether you're a man or a woman or you know of an Islamophobic hate crime. I want to hear from you tonight on 01582 481 822, because not only are we talking about the terrible shambles of the fact that Shamima Begum lost her appeal against a decision to revoke her UK citizenship, we're also talking about the fact that anti-Muslim cases have surged in the UK since the Hamas attacks, according to the charity Tel Mama. And we're going to be speaking to them in a moment and trying to understand what kind of information they are receiving and what the heat map looks like. So, for example, if you go to any country in the world, depending on the kind of data that you're looking at, there's always a heat map, like where are the hotspots of issues. So, for example, if you looked at a map of the UK, you could find all the burglary hotspots, also known on a heat map. So my question to Tel Mama, to Iman, will be, what are the heat map? What does the heat map look like when it comes to Islamophobic hate crimes in the UK since the Hamas attacks took place? Because people think that actually, yes, our Israeli citizens in the UK, Jewish people, feel threatened and feel very uncomfortable when these anti-war demonstrations are taking place. But these demonstrations are not against Israelis. These demonstrations are not against Jewish people. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. 01582 481 822. These demonstrations that are happening in London and in your towns nearby, one happened even in Luton today. These demonstrations are against the unjust killing of innocent Palestinian civilians who have got nothing to do with war or being combatants whatsoever. These demonstrations are against the far right-wing government and the actions that they have taken and the decisions they've made to bomb schools and hospitals. And now they're still thinking of going into a heavily concentrated area known as Rafah, which contains some 1.4 million Palestinians, because they've all been displaced from all over Gaza into this area. And despite America, the UK, and now Europe and Canada and Australia saying, no, you will not go into Rafah, the Israelis are very much planning on doing so. And they've actually given a deadline of the beginning of Ramadan. This is what they've said. They said the beginning of Ramadan is when we expect the hostages to be released. Otherwise, problems will ensue. So this is what the anti-war demonstrations are about. Those anti-war demonstrations, in my opinion, and 01582 481 822, I'd love to hear from you, are not anti-Jewish, are not anti-Israeli. But when you have hundreds of thousands of people that get together in an area, in a location, for anything, it could be an anti-war demo, it could be a gathering for listening to a famous speaker, it could be a concert, I don't know, it could be a nasheed event or whatever, you're always going to have one or two idiots that are going to step out of line. I mean, look at the Notting Hill Carnival, Zafar Saab, in London that happens every year. There's hundreds of people that get arrested. There's even people that die some years, stabbings and killings. Why are they not banning that? I mean, people in Notting Hill have tried to ban that for years, but that's never been cancelled. and no one said that's an anti-something.
But I don't think
Yeah.
many people want it cancelled.
Yeah.
It's people who...
Some politicians do.
Some politicians who've got an axe to grind, really. And that's the situation here as well. They've got politicians who've got an axe to grind.
Yeah, but when you and I, whenever we went on a demonstration for the recent demonstrations for Gaza, for the Palestinian situation, we never went because we're anti-Semitic. We never went because we're anti-Jew, anti-Israeli.
People are calling it anti-Semitic, are viewing anti-Semitism, interpreting anti-Semitism in a particular way, which is not necessarily the way that others perhaps would.
Yeah, we're anti-killing innocent civilians. And I think it was yourself that pointed out that a lot of people at those marches weren't even Muslim. A lot of them were non-Muslim.
I would say majority of them, overwhelming majority of people from different backgrounds, there are Muslims there.
Yeah.
And to paint it as a Muslim thing, and then Cruella today saying that Muslims are somehow controlling the parliament, right? Because the speaker managed to wreck a
that was a disaster. We'll come on to that in a second. Yeah, that was a disaster.
So it makes you wonder, right, what hole some people live in, right, who can come in, make claims like that, right? And they got newspapers who take them seriously.
I hear you. I'm gonna try and get Iman Atta back on the line. We're gonna try one more time. Assalamu alaikum, Iman. Can you hear me? If you could unmute yourself.
Wa alaikum salam.
Shukran, thank you. I can hear you now, and there's no echo, which is amazing news. So, Iman, first of all, tell us, as we were talking about anti-Muslim cases surging in the UK since the Hamas attacks, what has your charity, Tell Mama, found? And I also saw the news report, obviously on Sky News. I'm sure you saw that too, because you were informing that article as well. But what did you make of the stories in the press this week, and also the fact that in addition to anti-Semitism making the headlines, thanks to you, the Islamophobia has also now made the headlines as well across the nation. Do you think enough is being done?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think when we talk about anti-Muslim hatred, let's not forget that it did not start on October 7th. Anti-Muslim hatred has been on the rise in the UK for a while. On a yearly basis, we document over 2,500 cases. And obviously the significant increase that we see, which is the greatest actually rise that we documented since October 7th, or between October 7th to February 7th, showed that cases have tripled compared to the same period last year. So i.e. over 2,000 cases recorded in 4 months, reported across the UK, across different regions, and not just in one place, though majority of them are in London. We would like, by highlighting what actually Muslim communities, Middle Eastern communities have been going through over the past few months, to do is not just to be able to be there to support them, to advocate on their behalf, but also equally to put anti-Muslim hatred on the map, to actually say it's happening, it's taking place, and political leaders, authorities need to speak about it and need to address it. We're coming up shortly to the holy month of Ramadan. And obviously it's a month where we know that during that month, Muslim communities are more visible. Muslim worshippers are seeking refuge in mosques because that's a month of spirituality, a month of worship. And what we want is to ensure the safety of our communities, not just during that month, but actually in the current climate where communities are facing a rise of hatred. Whether it's Jewish communities or Muslim communities or Middle Eastern communities, what we want is measures to be put in place to safeguard our communities, Muslim communities, as other communities are. And equally as well to ensure that political leaders speak and address anti-Muslim hatred equally as, and rightly so, they have spoken about anti-Semitism.
Okay, Sister Iman, stay on the line because I want to come back to you after the break. I know you've been waiting a while, but I do want to ask you one very simple question after the break, which is specifically about the fact that it seems that a lot of these hate crimes are focused on one group of Muslims, one type of Muslim. And we're going to learn more about that from you after the break. But listeners, this is Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar, and Zafar Iqbal Saab on Friday, the 23rd of February. And if you are listening, don't forget 01582 481 822. I want to hear from you if you know about Islamophobia and have been subject, or know somebody who's been subject to anti-Muslim hate crime. Stay tuned. Friday Night Live. We'll be right back.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
हजरत अब्बास बिन अब्दुल मुत्तलिब रजी अल्लाह ताला अन्हो बयान करते हैं कि रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने फरमाया, जो शख्स अल्लाह के रब होने, इस्लाम के दीन होने और मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के रसूल होने पर राजी हो गया, इसने ईमान की लज्जत को पा लिया।
AK Windows South Limited, manufacturers and installers of high-quality UPVC windows and doors, bifold doors, composite doors, conservatories, porches, skypods, fascias, guttering, and much, much more. We specialize in double glazing and triple glazing using the best German profile. If you want quality at affordable prices, AK Windows is the place to go. If your house needs a facelift, you know who to trust. For a free quote, call AK Windows today on 01582 483 777 or visit us at Unit 10E, Britannia Estate, Leagrave Road, Luton.
हेलो, मेरा नाम डॉक्टर सैयदा है। अपने जिस्म में अगर आपको कुछ ठीक महसूस ना हो रहा हो तो हमसे बात करें। कैंसर के बारे में फिक्रमंद रहकर परेशान ना हो। टेस्ट कराने से ये परेशानी जाती रहेगी। जब तक टेस्ट नहीं कराएंगे तब तक आपको मालूम नहीं हो पाएगा। NHS आपको देखना चाहती है। अपनी GP प्रैक्टिस से राब्ता करें।
Had an accident, a bump, trip or fall? Then you need Claims Specialists, your first choice for accident claims. The Specialist Claims Company on Dunstable Road in Luton. With excellent access to expert solicitors and on a no-win, no-fee basis, Claims Specialists use their 30 years experience to help get you the best compensation possible. For injuries at work, taxi, PCO and private hire incidents, road accidents and vehicle damage, medical negligence, plus rented housing disrepair. In short, when you need to make any claim, click on claimspecialists.co.uk or call 01582 733 222.
আপনি যদি সোশ্যাল হাউজিং এ থাকেন এবং একটি সমস্যা আপনাকে ঘুমহীন রাত দেয়, তাহলে জেনে নিন আপনার অভিযোগ কিভাবে শোনাতে হয়। কারণ আপনি যদি আপনার বাড়িওয়ালার কাছে অভিযোগ করে থাকেন এবং আপনি তাদের চূড়ান্ত প্রতিক্রিয়াতে খুশি না হন, আপনি হাউজিং অম্বাজম্যানের কাছে আপনার অভিযোগ নিয়ে যেতে পারেন। তারা নিরপেক্ষ এবং আপনার বাড়িওয়ালাকে ব্যবস্থা নেওয়ার নির্দেশ দিতে পারে। প্রত্যেকেরই একটি নিরাপদ ও সুরক্ষিত বাড়ি প্রাপ্য। আপনার অধিকারগুলি জানুন। ভিজিট করুন gov.uk/social housing.
Today, 6,000 children will be orphaned. 1 in 10 people will go to bed hungry. Right now, 2.2 billion can't access clean water. Human Appeal makes the most of your mercy, protecting orphans, feeding families, treating the sick, saving lives, and restoring hope. So please, give mercy now. Visit humanappeal.org.uk or call 0161 225 0225.
Are you an avid bookworm? Or maybe you love books but just struggle to find the time to read? Then you need to tune into the Book Club Show on Inspire FM with Sister Imrana, where we'll be discussing a fab selection of books with special studio guests. Join us every Tuesday morning from 10 till 11 to inspire imagination and rekindle your love for reading. Don't forget the Book Club Show every Tuesday morning 10 till 11 on your very own Inspire 105.1 FM. From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to part 2 of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar and Zafar Iqbal. So we're talking about the rise of Islamophobia in the UK, and we've got Tel Mama, Sister Iman from Tel Mama on the line. I'm going to go straight back to her before we go into our next topic. Quick question for you, Sister Iman. Thank you for staying on the line. And don't forget, listeners, 01582 481 822. We do have callers on the line as well, so we're going to take some calls in a bit on the Islamophobia topic and also the rest of our topics, because you are going to want to call in from these topics, listeners. We're going to be asking the question, if the general election was called next week, who would you vote for? Would you vote Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green Party, or none of the above? That's the question we're going to be asking in a few minutes' time. And we'll be speaking to Saeed Taqi Razvi on that topic, who is a political analyst. So stay there, stay tuned, Saeed Saab. We're going to come to you in a moment. But let me go back to our Sister Iman from Tel Mama, who is an independent, non-governmental organization which works on tackling anti-Muslim hatred. So, Sister Iman, one question I have for you, if I may, before we close on this topic. But listeners, 01582481822, if you do want to take part on this topic still, is it seems as though those who are perpetrating anti-Muslim hate crimes, Islamophobia in the UK, are targeting one group of Muslims. And who are they, sister?
Women tend to be the number one target of anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia. It's been the case throughout, but more significantly even since October 7th. It's usually because it's a male to female violence. It's usually a male individual that thinks he can have a go at a woman because she's weak or she's vulnerable, and we're definitely not. But that's the perception that that male has. In addition to that, the visibility of that woman, either wearing the headscarf, the hijab, the face veil, or the abaya, or speaking Arabic, or being from a Middle Eastern background or Asian background. So a few elements that actually drive that individual to kind of unleash his attack or his abuse on that woman. Cases that we received of women being attacked are harassment, abuse, physical assaults, death threats, in the physical world, and equally the same harassment as well in the online world.
Thank you for that sharing. There's a terrible situation, I got to say, where these cowards are targeting what they call, perceivably vulnerable women. But I know a lot of women that wear hijab, niqab, the abaya, mashallah. They're strong women and they don't stand for any nonsense. And I'm sure they're listening to the program right now. Listeners, 01582481822. Lastly, Sister Iman, if somebody is subjected to Islamophobic hate crime, whether it's because of the Hamas incident or not, what can they do? What should they do?
We do urge anyone who's been subjected to any hate incident to report it to us in confidence, to Tell Mama. They can call us on 0800 456 1226. That is 0800 456 1226. We can offer advice, support, emotional support, advocacy, lobbying, support through the criminal justice process, as well as counseling services. But if you are in danger and you have been subjected to physical attack, please, please, please do report it as well to the police by calling 999 with an emergency, or 101.
Thank you so much. So 999 or 101, don't hesitate. If it's an emergency, listeners, especially to the sisters who are listening to tonight's program, or brothers, if you're just a Muslim, frankly speaking, let your friends, family, sisters, mothers, grandmothers, let everyone know that they should not tolerate any kind of Islamophobic abuse, whether it's a finger up at you when you're driving a car and you happen to be wearing a hijab, or whether it is somebody calling out a name, calling you a terrorist, or even worse so, attempting to pull off a garment that you might be wearing, whether it's your hijab or whatever. If you have a visible sign of being Muslim on you, and you feel that you have been attacked verbally, and certainly, hopefully not physically, but any of those situations happen to you, you need to call 999 if your life is in imminent danger, if you feel imminent threat to your life, or 101 to report it after the fact if you feel like it's not an imminent threat to your life. Is that correct, Sister Iman? I don't want to give out incorrect information.
Absolutely. If a person is in imminent danger, to dial 999. If they're not and they would like to report it to the police, please dial 101. And we in Tell Mama, we're always here to help and support. Do not suffer in silence. Do not feel that there's no one there to hear you out. We're there to help and support. So feel free to call us at any time.
Absolutely. 0800 456 1226 is the number for Tell Mama as well. Sister Iman Atta from Tell Mama, keep doing a great job, and we appreciate your time tonight on Friday Night Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, listeners, this is Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar, and Zafar Iqbal Saab. Zafar Saab, I've got to say, Islamophobic hate crime, it is going up. And, we hear a lot of people saying that anti-Semitism is up, and I'm sure it is. But we need to remember that actually Islamophobia and Islamophobic hate crime, anti-Muslim hate crime, is also up in the same level of magnitude as it's being argued that anti-Semitism up. And this is not a race. If anything, we want to make it a race to the bottom where nobody in any community is reporting any kind of hate crime against them. But that's just not the reality today. And we need to be proactive as a people, as a community, because listeners, if you don't report an Islamophobic hate crime that may have been perpetrated against you or a member of your family, then what will happen is the politicians will just plead ignorance. The police will plead ignorance, saying, well, Nobody's reporting it, and therefore it's not happening. But we know that's not true. So we have to be proactive in reporting any incident in order for them to capture that data and then report on it in order that they can do something about it. Maybe it could change the way policing happens in an area because they see a higher concentration of a certain type of crime happening. And that's why it's so important that we report all kinds of crimes, not just religious hate crimes like the ones that we've been talking about right now, but any kind of crime. It's important that you report it, even though you think you might not catch, by reporting it, you might not catch the perpetrator of said crime. Anyway, moving on to the next topic, but don't forget you can take part at any time in today's show, 01582 481 822. I especially want to hear from people who know of others that have been subjected to anti-Muslim hate crime. I think it's really important that we hear from you. And I know you're out there. I've spoken to people that know people who have been subjected to anti-Muslim hate crime. You are out there, and I would like to hear from you. I'd like to hear what happened to you and what you did about it. Not necessarily was the crime solved, and if it was, that's great. But that's just the fact that, did you report it? And if you didn't report it, why didn't you report it? What's stopping you from reporting these crimes? Stay tuned for that, 01582 481 822 to get your views across. I'm going to keep the lines open on that topic. And I think we had a couple of callers calling in and we couldn't come to you early enough. Apologies about that. But if you do want to call back, 01582 481 822. We're going to go to our next topic now. And the question is, if a general election was called next week, who would you vote for? Tough questions, Zafar Saab. I'm going to ask your opinion on that in a minute. But we've also got on the line, we're delighted to be joined by somebody very special who is also no stranger to this program and also has his opinion to share. And he is none other than Sayyid Taqi Rizvi, who is a political analyst, and he's live on the radio right now. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid Saab, how are you?
Alaikum salam. Thank you for having me on. Hope inshallah we can contribute to something positive in the discussion.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure you will. But tell me, when it comes to this question, if a general election was called next week, let's just say our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a general election next week, who would you vote for? Who would you suggest we vote for? And how would you think about this question?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The bazaar is really hot at the moment. Political bazaar is really hot at the moment in the sense that there's a great concern by all the political parties whether they have lost their usual vote bank. And that is the seriousness of the whole thing. Even yesterday's dilemma in the parliament was not literally to save politicians' lives, but was to save politicians' seats in the election.
It wasn't even a dilemma, Sayyid Saab. I would argue it was chaos. It was an episode of EastEnders.
It was sabotage.
I mean, they completely. I mean, the speaker, yes, he made a stupid decision. He made an unprecedented decision, but the whole topic moved away from Gaza to this whole stupid debate on whether the speaker made the right decision or not. Right, Sayyid Saab?
I think the point is right in the sense that was it a right decision or not? But, there's always an ethical point as well to be made here, that you don't look at the actual problem of the individual, you would look at the roots of that problem. And consequently, when you look at the roots of the issue that unfolded yesterday, and that really tries to address to your main question, is all the politicians, and particularly the Labour politicians are concerned immensely as to whether they will secure seats in the
We've got a call on the line. I want to go to him very quickly. Assalamu alaikum, caller. You're live on the radio. Thanks for calling. What's your name?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed.
Mohammed, how are you, Mohammed, today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Mohammed, what are you calling about? Are you calling about Islamophobia or voting in the general election?
It's got to do with on the topic of general election.
Tell me.
I'm a 17-year-old adolescent from Luton.
Okay.
And I'm going to be 18 soon. And as a young Muslim, I don't see any party that can benefit me in the United Kingdom. What advice do you have for me?
Wow. You don't see any party that can benefit you. What advice do we have for you? And let me just ask you another couple of questions, if I may. What do you see in the parties right now? Like, what are you seeing? Like, when you look at the Labour Party, when you look at the Conservatives, What goes through your mind? Why can't you see anything good in them? Are you still there, Mohammed?
I lost him.
We've lost him. Okay, well, great question. And I think I'm going to go back to our Zoom caller. But great question, great call. 01582481822. Keep those calls coming, listeners. 17-year-old coming on to 18, Said Saab. And see, look at what he's saying. He's saying he can't see anyone that represents him, and he's going to be of voting age very soon. Said Saab, back to you. Sorry to interrupt you. Talking about Labour Party.
No, I think his point is quite valid in the present conversation, that none of the parties are representing the political attitudes of the communities. And, particularly, as I said, the Labour Party has always banked on the Asian, Muslim, the black vote. And all these votes are considering Labour Party as being either racist or purely Islamophobic. Various aspects of it. And consequently, that proved in November when they abstained in Parliament with regarding to the ceasefire vote in issues of Gaza. So I think that.
Yeah, it's the yo-yo vote as well, Said Saab. If you think about it, 1 minute they're saying, oh, no ceasefire. And the next minute they're saying, oh, sustainable ceasefire. And suddenly now...
A humanitarian ceasefire.
Now it's a humanitarian ceasefire. And Keir Starmer obviously knows that he's losing the Muslim vote totally. Like, I don't know of a single Muslim so far. Yeah. Any Muslim who is thinking of voting for Keir Starmer right now and the Labour Party, I would love to hear from you. Why are you thinking that? 01582. I was going to say you're crazy if you are thinking that. But no, you're not. I'm sure you are rationally deciding that point of view, but I want to hear from you. 01582481822. Because Said Saab, there is the argument that says we have to vote for the lesser of the evils, and Labour, regardless of what you think of the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, they are still the lesser of the evils. What say you?
Well, the issue is not about lesser of the evils. It's finding politicians who are principled. And when those principles are put to question, then it doesn't really matter if your principle loses in a vote. And this is like, for example, Lemmy. He's talking about power and not whatever he used as vocabulary of that. If you're just striving for power, then there are many people in the world who've strived for power and achieved power, and they've been zalim over the people. They've been oppressors over the people. So it's and whilst we are in that environment of trying to cast our vote in a democratic manner, then we have to decide on whether is it really looking for the less of the two evils. Because you see, nationally, there's a very big difficulty. Even Starmer is facing that difficulty with these independent candidates.
Yeah.
Great point. I
think it's all a matter of threshold of evil as well. I think
threshold of evil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think both the parties, Conservatives and Labour, are way above the threshold of evil. To be honest,
they're all evil.
They're evil beyond recognition.
But yeah.
Right. So therefore, I think it has to be an alternative.
No, but let me, before I go back to Said Saab, one thing I've noticed about this election that's going to most likely happen towards the end of this year is that Labour are in a very comfortable position. They know they are in a very comfortable position. They know that we're highly, highly likely to have the next Prime Minister as Sir Keir Starmer.
With the majority.
With a majority, with a massive, overwhelming majority. And if we need evidence for that, we just have to look at the two by-elections that massively swung towards red seats when they were strongly blue. So that's a preview of of the annihilation that is to come probably later on. So I think
in some ways that's simplistic, right? Because Keir is moving to the center right, effectively, right? And people of conservative votes, basically, who are of the center right, are going to him. But people of the left, people who were genuine Labour, right, are thinking about leaving.
Original Labour,
I think leave. So he might think, right, that he's comfortable based on polls, etc. And he probably is, right. The polls are accurate.
Yeah.
But there are now people out deliberately to dent him.
But here's the thing, Zafar Saab. I mean, you and I, we would have leverage in a normal election, right? Because we could say, well, what about the issue of topics like Shamima Begum? What are you going to
No,
do
but
about that?
I think
if you want our
this
votes?
trumps everything, right? So what you're talking about, the Palestinian cause is not an Islamic or Muslim cause, right? It's a humanitarian cause.
Absolutely.
It's a humanitarian cause, right? It's a cause for justice, basically, yeah? And any person, right, who cares about social justice, whether he's Labour, Conservative, whichever, if they care about social justice and they care about humanity, right, they will be on the side of the party that speaks their language. And these two parties aren't speaking that language. They're speaking the language of the oppressors, right? So therefore, I think there's going to be a big surprise in the next election, right? So I think this man, he clearly doesn't represent.
You mean Keir Starmer?
Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
He's out of touch, basically, right?
He is. Yeah.
He's out of touch, and unless he leaves, I think Labour are going to get a trouncing.
He's not going to go anywhere. But say it's what do you make of that point from Zafar Saab?
I think Zafar, you have a very important point to make, and you know, statistics are not necessarily pinning the results for us. You know, even in the two last elections, you see that yes, there's been a huge drop for the Conservative Party, but there hasn't been a huge increase in the Labour vote. You know, and that does dictate to you know, it's sufficient, as a lot of stats are going around saying that there are at least 90 constituencies where Muslim vote can have a real dent on the Labour Party's candidate, and at least 20 constituencies where it's possible that they could be defeated. So, you know, like for example, you know, we have
So say are you saying we should go independent?
I think that is where
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you saying that we should go independent? Yeah.
That's where the cookie is crumbling. You know, there are a lot of areas where independent candidates have defeated Labour candidates. You know, in local council elections. You know, you've got a sister who was in East London. I'm sure you've heard of her. That she used to be a Labour councillor. Due to the present situation, she resigned. She stood up against the Labour councillor and against a Labour candidate, and she defeated him by 500 votes. You know, there's a sister standing against.
Well, that's the way to make your voice heard. Absolutely. I love that idea about yeah, and that really will teach Labour a lesson, especially in constituencies where we know that we can win the vote, where the Muslim majorities can actually swing it towards them.
There's got to be two approaches, basically, right? Two strategic approaches.
Yeah.
One is to hold your Labour MPs to account, to let them know, right, your feelings, and have a scorecard to say, right, if you're going to get my vote next time,
yeah,
right, these are the things that you have to value and fight for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one strategy, one option. The other option basically is the independent, like you said, basically a punishment vote, a protest vote.
Yeah.
So I to be honest, I think either way, the MPs have got to reflect people's views.
They're not, though. That's the thing. And I've got a really good. Asif has just sent us a WhatsApp message saying, "Assalamu alaikum. Thanks, Asif. I would love to hear your voice next time, but he's not in the mood for calling in right now. But we appreciate your WhatsApp message." He's saying, "Assalamu alaikum. There's no party that will look after the Muslims and the BAME group. That's the Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups. Unfortunately, our elders have been working class and supported Labour and trade unions. Time for Muslims to wake up and set up an independent party for working class people. That is the average Joe. UK is getting more divided, and the rise of racism and anti-Muslim sentiment is growing in the UK. Anti-Zionist is not anti-Jewish. Muslims never had a problem with the Jews. The West did, is what one WhatsApper is saying. This is 01582481822. I'd love to have your calls in as well, not just WhatsApp messages. But Asif, really appreciate your message there. What a great, interesting point from that particular listener. Said, so what do you make of that? An independent Muslim party is something that could be in order. What do you reckon, in especially key constituencies where we can swing the vote in that group's favor?
I think the direction which Zafar is suggesting is quite interesting, and it is a conversation a lot of people are having, and that is how really and truly are we Muslims proper lobbyists or not? You know, where you see all these other communities, they don't necessarily stack up councillors or MPs to their names. They see how far they can pressurize a particular type of thinking to determine and justify their their progression. And that is a
interesting.
Very valid point.
We've got a caller on the line. Salam, caller, you're live on the radio. Where are you calling from?
Walaikum salam. I'm calling from Luton. Jazakallah for hearing taking my call. My thoughts, to be honest, is more on a local level. As a local person living in Luton, I've rarely got interested in the elections and hardly ever voted. But this year, in particular with what's happening in Gaza, I thought maybe there's a reason to vote and maybe we should do something. But to be honest, I don't know Keir Starmer, I don't know Rishi, I don't know any of these guys. I've never met them. I have no desire to. My concern is with the local people in Luton. These are our representatives. These are the people that we can reach to and speak to. And it's the silence from those people which has really demotivated me. And I'm really asking the question around the question that you're asking about which party to vote for. And I've absolutely, I'm at loss. I don't know, because there's absolutely nobody there that is actually standing for the haqq. And I believe when you're in a situation where the people are like that, you're going to get leaders like that. The leaders don't just get born from nowhere. It's the people that make the leaders. So when your leaders are like that because the people are like that. So I think we need to change the approach. It's not about changing the leaders. That's not going to change anything. We need to change the people, and that will automatically bring the right leaders.
So, caller, let me ask you a question very, very quickly. Jazakallah khair for your calling, sharing that perspective. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of our listeners listening right now. But if you were to be forced to go towards the ballot box, as far as what I'm hearing from you is none of the above right now. There isn't a leader that reflects you, and you want to focus more locally at the local level. But if we think about the local level, I mean, not much is happening. I mean, do you feel that not much is happening in Luton?
Exactly my point, not at all. And this is why, to be honest, unfortunately, I'm at a position where I literally feel whoever I vote for, I won't vote wholeheartedly. They're not going to be speaking my voice. They're not going to be taking my voice to the higher authorities, wherever they may be. Hence, most likely in this current situation, I'll refrain to vote. Okay. And it's unfortunate, because that will possibly mean a vote for the opposite party. If you refrain to vote, again, is a problem as well. But
yeah, exactly.
What do you do? What do you do?
Thank you very much for calling on the radio, Jazakallah khair. That was a caller from locally in Luton, sharing his perspectives. I've got to say, Zafar Saab and Said Saab, last words with you, Said Saab. Again, another caller saying, listen, I don't see any of these two leaders as potential people I can vote for. More concerned locally. Said Saab, last words with you in 30 seconds.
I think we need to get united and stand as an independent impact on the local politics. Unite all the denominations, particularly if you want to have a Muslim vote working together.
Yeah, interesting points there. Well, that was the voice of Sayyid Taqi Jafar Rizvi, who was on the line there, sharing his perspectives as a political analyst. Jazakallah khair, Sayyid Saab, for joining. I hope we can have you on the program in the future. Lovely hearing your point of view as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. And then Zafar Saab, what's your take there? I mean, it's really sad to hear that we have a 17-year-old call in. We just had a caller a moment ago, and Said Saab also making some really pertinent points. People suggesting independent might be the way forward, and that's quite concerning because really, yes, independent is good.
You've got to see the local situation, right? And you've
got
to see what the reason you're voting.
But can you make much change as an independent at the national level?
You can't, but it's a protest vote, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually sending a message to say you're ignoring us, right? Or you've ignored a certain community, and that community is going to protest, basically, right? So it's a protest vote. Independence can have an impact if it's a hung parliament, basically, right? And every vote counts in a hung parliament.
Yeah.
When they have a coalition, etc. But if they're not in a coalition, then probably doesn't make a lot of difference. But the key thing is that there is another law, right, which says that if the local MP isn't listening to the local people have a right to have the election rerun again, as long as I think there's 100,000 people actually petition for that to happen.
It's a lot of people, though.
It's a lot of people, but I don't know the exact number.
Yeah.
But there is a law out there which you could have your MPs replaced if they're not listening to us. And how great it would be if Keir Starmer was actually pulled down based on that.
Yeah, I think that's a long shot, though, and I think we're going to have to talk more about that after the break. Listeners, 01582 481 822. We'll be right back. Friday Night Live. Stay tuned. We'll be back after these messages.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Brother Bona Muhammad, and you are listening to Inspire FM.
रिश्ता नेटवर्किंग आज के इस मसरूफ और गहमा गहमी के दौर में रिश्ता ढूंढना किसी मुहिम से कम नहीं। ये एक मुश्किल काम है, लेकिन घबराइए नहीं। इंस्पायर एफएम रिश्ता नेटवर्किंग के साथ मिलकर कम्युनिटी के इस मसले में आपकी मदद के लिए अपनी खिदमत पेश कर रहा है। 1 मार्च बरोज जुमा 6 बजे क्रेसेंट हॉल बरी पार्क में सिर्फ खवातीन की नशिस्तों का एहतमाम किया गया है, जिसमें आप अपने अजीज व अकारब के लिए रिश्ता ढूंढ सकेंगे। हमारे पास महदूद नशिस्तें बाकी हैं। आज ही रजिस्ट्रेशन करवाइए और इस कार्य खैर में हिस्सा लीजिए। मजीद मालूमात के लिए विजिट कीजिए rishta-networking.co.uk। अपने जीवन साथी की तलाश रिश्ता नेटवर्किंग और इंस्पायर एफएम के साथ।
Attention all electricians, builders and DIY enthusiasts. Capital Electrical Wholesalers are now open in Luton. It's a fully stocked branch with experienced staff on hand to help with all your electrical needs. With branches also in Greenford, Tottenham, Richmond and Ashton. Capital Electrical Wholesalers only stock the biggest names, including JCC, Saxby, Knightsbridge, Hamilton, MK, Wilex, Hager, Aco Smoke Alarms and many more. That's Capital Electrical at Unit M, Kingsway Industrial Estate. Call 01582 801122.
For expert legal advice and support, talk with Luton's leading solicitors, Hannah Solicitors. We specialise in conveyancing, wills and probate, family law, immigration and personal injury, legal matters that matter to you. Our experienced legal team are here to help you through every step of the way. Call 01582 329 069. That's 01582 329 069 or click on hannahsolicitors.co.uk. Hannah Solicitors, professional advice with a tailored approach.
Biscard Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton, stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscard Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscard Pharmacy, 157A Biscard Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Crisis Aid is here for those facing the harsh winter, without shelter, without warmth. Just a small donation of £30 can provide essential winter supplies like blankets, heaters and clothing. Visit www.crisisaid.org.uk or call us at 01582 211 066. Your support can transform lives this winter. Don't wait. The time to act is now.
Oh, Hillary, I was going to use newspaper display advertising,
But
it costs £10 per inch.
And that's too expensive.
Oh, indeed it is. I want to sell a 10-foot ladder.
Oh, Roger, invest in an ear-catching advertising campaign on this radio station instead. It's a great way to tell people about your products and service.
For details, click on inspirefm.org, then advertise. From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
From the heart of Bedfordshire in Luton on 105.1 FM. This is Inspire FM News.
This is the national and international news today, Friday, 23rd of February for Inspire FM, read by Shaheen Mirza. First, the headlines. Walled site grows at Egypt border near Gaza. 4 dead and more missing in Spain tower block fires. UK and EU reach new deal on stopping small boat crossings. Price cap for energy to fall to £1,690 from April, its lowest for 2 years. Met Police is arrogant and resistant to change, says mother of Stephen Lawrence. Cocaine haul worth £450 million found hidden in banana shipment in largest ever Class A drugs bust. And that concludes today's news roundup.
Always up to date with everything that's happening locally, nationally and internationally. This is Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to part 3 of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live. 01582 481 822 is the number to call to take part in tonight's program. And the topics we're talking about are Islamophobia, but not just Islamophobia. If you've been subjected to or know somebody who's been subjected to an Islamophobic hate crime, we would love to hear from you and hear your story if possible. Please do call in if you can. I would love for you to call in and speak to us. Zafar and I will not bite. In fact, we know that the communities across the UK that we're broadcasting out to tonight, which includes Luton, but also includes Sheffield, Nottingham, Peterborough, Derby, and also across our partner stations in the Midlands, are listening. And we know that you have thoughts on these topics. What say you about the Shamima Begum topic? Was it right initially for Sajid Javid to actually remove her citizenship based on the fact that she was a 15-year-old when she left for Syria without her parental permission and was allegedly groomed? Is it right for them to do that? And would they have done the same thing if Shamima was of a white English descent? Or is it because of the fact that she has a Bangladeshi origin that they feel that they can do this? It's very concerning stuff. But also, Islamophobia is another topic that we've been talking about. In case you didn't hear the news this week, anti-Muslim hate crime in the UK has more than tripled in the 4 months since Hamas's attacks, according to Tel Mama. And we heard from Sister Iman on Tel Mama saying that most of those attacks have been instigated against women by men, and that's a shameful thing. I would love to hear from anyone out there who's aware of an Islamophobic attack or hate crime that wants to share their story with us, or share the story of a family member or a friend, because we need to hear about these things and what you did about it. And if you didn't report the crime, why didn't you? 01582 481 822. And just most notably, we've also been asking the question, if a general election was called next week, who would you vote for? Would you vote for the Labour Party? Would you vote for the Conservatives? Would you vote for the Lib Dems? Would you vote for the Greens? Or would you vote for an independent? Because what we've just heard in the previous part of tonight's program is that maybe an independent candidate that represents you and me and our interests, especially in those constituencies that may have a possibility of winning that vote, may be the way forward, especially as Zafar Saab was suggesting, in the form of a protest. It could be the way forward. 01582 481 822. If a general election was called next week, who would you vote for? Give us your perspectives on the line. And actually, we had a good message come in on WhatsApp from Hamza saying, Assalamu alaikum, enjoying the discussion. Question for the panel, and Zafar Saab, I'm going to put this question to you, which is, do you reckon we might have the least turnout in history when it comes to voters in the next election? What do you reckon?
I hope not, to be honest. It's quite possible. I hope not, because not voting is defeatist. It's giving up. It's giving up to despair, and that's what people who are in power want, basically, at the end of the day, because it gives them a free ticket, a free ride. So people have got to turn out, even if they turn up and waste their vote, right, a protest vote, then, at least it counts as something. But not turning up, right, I think is the worst of all options.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view. And I got to be honest, at the moment, I am not motivated to turn up. I know that's not a good thing, but I'm not currently motivated to turn up, because you look at the Conservative Party and their record and their lack of action on Gaza. Why did it have to take over 25,000, people, humans' lives to be killed, to die in suffering, in order for now the world to come out and say, okay, enough is enough? Even Prince William, as you know, came out earlier this week saying, okay, the fighting needs to end. But why is it the fact that these people are now coming out? I respect the fact that a royal that doesn't normally, and the royal family, if you know about the royal family in this country, they don't normally embed themselves in political situations.
I have to respect that.
It is respectable.
Yeah, it's
Prince William, future king, right?
His future king has come out there and he's made I think a balanced plea, basically.
I think it's very balanced and very fair.
Very fair. So I think it's quite obvious now, right, that Israel isn't pursuing the hostages. If it is pursuing the release of the hostages, it's a bloody useless army in the world, right, where they've destroyed 3/4 of the country.
Highly ineffective.
And the methodology it's always been about removing the population, right, from Gaza. So they've got other plans for it.
And they would
basically.
suggest that's not the case. They would suggest, no, we are looking in these areas because there is a network of quote unquote tunnels.
Well, you
Where
know,
the heck are these
they say there's a
tunnels?
network of tunnels,
Yeah.
right? If you're underneath, if you're digging under the ground and you're digging these big holes, right?
Yeah.
Why haven't you dug a hole all the way up to the Knesset and
Yeah.
blown up the Knesset?
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. This tunnel argument is just unacceptable. And then they say, oh, well, Hamas is the only army that uses humans as a shield. That's a load of rubbish, in my opinion. And the reason why it's a load of rubbish is because there's nowhere else for them to go, right? I mean, if you are fighting a war, I mean, as we all know, and this is not me, this is fact, that Gaza has been called an open prison, the world's largest open air prison.
Right.
There's nowhere else for these people to fight from if they are whatever you want to call them, resistance fighters, whatever. Of course, they're a prescribed organization and I would never condone any acts of violence or criminality. But what I will say is that the Israeli argument of now going into Gaza is starting to crumble, especially in the sight of not just the Americans, who are their closest ally, who give them billions in foreign aid every year, but also
And military aid.
as well. But also in the eyes of the UK, and the UK is saying, oh, well, we're doing this because Canada is also talking now about the severity of the situation. Australia is. They're saying we're part of a bigger club. It's not just the UK government taking this position and the Labour opposition taking this position. It's actually a lot of countries now taking this opposition collectively against the right-wing extremist Israeli government, because that's what they are. They're a bunch of extremists, notwithstanding Netanyahu, who is, has been against the two-state solution for years and actually came out on the back of this issue as well. 01582 481822. What say you, listeners, about this topic? Are you disenfranchised? Are you going to vote for anyone if an election was called next week? Who would you vote for? Of course, an election is not going to be called next week because the Conservative Party need as much time as possible to garner votes back towards them. And they're going to use the upcoming budget in March to try to do that. I'm sure the Chancellor of the Exchequer is going to want to use the upcoming budget in a few weeks' time in March to try to win back some votes that they have clearly lost. But will it be enough to swing the votes in the Conservative favor? I highly doubt that. They'll have to pull out some magical things for everyone to change their views. But people have had enough of the Conservatives.
I think it's not just this. It's the economy. It's the way that Conservatives have actually sort of led, internal politics of dissent. So there's been a lot of things that have gone wrong for the Conservatives, to be honest. But they have been in power too long, to be honest. And if they've been in power that long, they think that they've got it sewn up, basically. So I think.
All right.
I think that they're on their way out, right? I think the question really is Labour, when they come back in again, have they got the mechanism, the tools, the ideas, the thoughts to run the economy in a better way, right? And also deal with people in a more just way. And as it sounds at the moment,
we're going to get the same package.
We're going to get the
Very
same
similar
package.
to the Conservatives. Yeah.
And to be fair, the way where UK is at the moment in terms of debt, right, and debt servicing, it doesn't have a lot of room to maneuver.
Yeah.
A lot of the levers of government have been privatized, have been sent out, given away. So the governments have, apart from taxes and those type of revenues, there's very little wriggle room, especially when you've got a debt burden the way it has, UK has. So.
Yeah, and foreign policy is not going to change. It's not changed for decades, and they're not going to change the foreign policy anytime soon. And Keir Starmer looks like he is just going to be another prime minister that's not really going to radically change much in terms of the UK standing in the world. Rishi Sunak tried to do some stuff around artificial intelligence, which the Americans said we're not having that happening, and they just sent their vice president to just.
But to be honest, I think this whole Rishi Sunak thing was a disaster. I think in some ways I don't like the guy, but Boris would have been a better prime minister.
You mean in front of the world?
Well, not in front of the world, but in terms of running things, basically.
Yeah, I mean, getting things done, charisma, followership, leadership, all that stuff.
I think out of the two, Rishi and him, I think it would have been
It's a
better.
no-brainer, but the thing is...
Rishi, although it's a tick mark for us Asians, the fact that an Asian's become a prime minister.
Yeah.
Not through the ballot box, though.
Yeah, that's true. Through the conservative ballot box, but not through others. Yeah.
Through other but he's not really shown any leadership, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a nerd. I think he knows how to calculate and
numbers.
He's a numbers guy. Obviously, former chancellor, former assistant to the chancellor before he became chancellor himself. And Sajid Javid, we mentioned him a few times already in tonight's show, but he was the chancellor and he resigned. I've got to say, Rishi has his strength in terms of the calculations that he's able to make. However, is he an effective
the other
leader?
thing the other thing that we miss out, we don't have discussions about often, is are these people in power genuinely looking after the country?
Yeah.
Or they are genuinely looking after themselves.
WhatsApp message, somebody saying, we're living in a dark times, when someone says Boris Johnson would have been a good alternative. Thank you for that WhatsApp message, and you know who you are, listener. 01582481822. I want to move on to another topic. I want to add another topic to the mix, because I know this will inspire a lot of opinion, and this program is all about opinion. We're sharing our opinions on this program. And I want to hear your opinions as well. 01582481822. You can WhatsApp us, but highly preferred that we have live calls on the program. But the next topic is, and this is an interesting one, so stay on your seats. Don't jump out of your seats, women and men, because I'm asking the question, should men do more housework? Zafar Saab. So when I talk about housework, Zafar Saab smiling here, should men do more housework? And when we're talking about housework, we're talking about, for example, who in your house takes out the bins? Who mows the lawn? Who organizes the household finances? Who does the washing up? Who cooks the meals? Who does the food shopping? Who does the laundry and washing clothes? Who cleans the house? And who looks after the children? And my question to you is, does the woman in the house do more if you're married? Or does the man do most of these things? 01582481822. And if the woman in the house or women in the house do more of these things, i.e. your daughters or your wife, then should the man be doing more, or should the sons and the men be doing more, the husband or so-called head of the house be doing more, and the boys be doing more when it comes to taking out the bins, mowing the lawn, organizing household finances, washing up, cooking meals, food shopping, laundry, washing clothes, cleaning the house, looking after children? Now listen, Zafar Saab, I'm going to be a bit controversial here. I'm going to get lots of women cursing me right now, and I hope my wife is not listening. But when it comes to some of this stuff, I'm actually quite good at it, and I enjoy doing it. And some of this stuff, I'm probably good at it, but I absolutely hate it, and I leave it to the missus. And I am guilty as charged. And one of those things is when it comes to doing the laundry and washing clothes. That's just not something I feel my DNA is able to do. But I'd be contradicting that, because the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Well, you mean you find it hard to shove stuff into a washing machine?
It's not just that. It's the whole. Yeah, it is that. But it's taking it out. If you have a dryer, putting it in the dryer or on the washing line, and you can't put it in the washing line outdoors because it's raining like heck the last few days, especially in Luton. But then the other thing is cooking meals. I'm just not a good cook. I can microwave stuff, but I'm not one of those people that can chop onions and coriander, get a bit of chicken, stick it into a handy, mix it up. I just don't do a very good job. And maybe it's because I haven't tried. But what do you reckon, listeners? 01582481822. Should men do more housework in general? And it could be that, I'm pretty sure if you have a man and a woman living together right now in a household with children, they will disagree about who does what and how much of who does what. That's always a common contention. But Zafar, how about you? Like in your house, taking out the bins? Is that you or the missus or somebody else?
Somebody else.
Somebody else. So somebody else does that in your house. Okay. What about mowing the lawn? Gardening.
That's me.
So you're the gardener in the house.
Yeah.
Okay. Organizing household finances.
That's
Got to think about that one.
Got to think about that. It's me. It's a joint thing.
It's a joint thing. Okay. So a joint agreement there. Washing up.
Pass.
So I mean, when I say washing up, I mean washing the dishes.
So
who puts? Some of us have a dishwasher. So I don't do this. So I can't even do the act of taking the dishes and putting them in the dishwasher. I refuse to do that. And my wife is lovely, and my daughters take care of that. And that's not because I think they're women or girls, and therefore they should get used to household duties. I'm not of that mindset.
Let me make a general statement, right?
All right, here we go.
Then we can talk about specifics.
Everyone's thinking this guy.
Right. Well, there's no secret, right? I have a traditional marriage, right?
Oh, traditional marriage.
Traditional marriage.
Ooh.
Yeah, my wife is from Pakistan. I was born in Pakistan, but came here.
That's like most people. Lots of people.
But so my wife does most of the work in the house, right? And I work. I've got a day job, right? People might think, right, that's not how it is in a modern day. But I've been married for 30 years, right? So there's something working there.
Yeah.
Right.
And your wife is happy?
My wife is happy. Yes, is happy.
Yeah,
I try to help as much as I can.
Yeah.
As far as the cooking goes, if I did the cooking, she'll be offended.
Yeah.
Because she comes from the culture, right, where she feels that's has a role.
Yeah.
That's what she does it. So there are, I think. But there's this is a specific case.
Yeah.
I think generally, if you think about it, now we're living in a different scenario where men and women work.
Yeah.
And if both men and women are working, then it's got to be an individual case.
Someone's got to pay the bills, right? And
it's got to be case by case basis, right? So if the husband works longer hours than the wife, then the wife does the chores. If they work equal number of hours, then you just got to work out your situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so somebody's WhatsApped saying, how many men even know the color of the tiles in their kitchen?
I know mine, right? Because I have put them in there. Yeah,
you put them physically. So you did some housework there or some chores. But it's an interesting point that you make, Zafar Saab. And obviously, I mean, I think that traditional marriages are even happening today. Not even as of you described 30 years ago.
We say traditional marriages, right?
What is that? Yeah, what's a traditional marriage now? Like it's. I mean,
well, there's defined roles basically. The women does the housework, right?
Yeah.
And men goes out to work.
Yeah,
that's your traditional marriage, and that's not traditional.
And that's not traditional Pakistani.
It's traditional world over.
Yeah, but even in the UK, if you go back 50 years, 20 years,
that's right.
Women would do anywhere in the world, right?
Correct,
Absolutely,
right.
Women would do the housework. And men would do the working outside the house to bring the money in, right? They would be so-called breadwinners, right? That's changed, as you've said. But my question is, now that women are also working and men are also working in most households, at least that I know, men and women both work. My wife works, I work, and it's a give and take, right? As you were saying. But I would love to know what you think on the line, listeners. 01582 481 822. Do you think men need to do more of the housework? Because like Zafar Saab, you mentioned that you do the gardening. I definitely would be the gardener of my household. My wife is very good at DIY. So when it comes to doing the IKEA or the DIY, I actually delegate that and she's happy to do that because she knows I'm going to make a mess of it. So it's going to be falling off.
So what you're telling me, right? You do jack at home.
I inspire, I motivate, I delegate. This is my job. And actually, it's really funny because recently we had some builders around the house, and we had to do some physical work, right? And me, in my profession, I'm a manager, right? I'm a leader, and I was standing there telling everyone what to do. But not actually doing the work myself. And I was like, that's what I do. I inspire, I motivate. I go out and get hearts and minds together to get the work done. But I do enjoy the gardening. That's definitely something that I do. I keeping things in impeccable order. And I do a bit of DIY around the house. Like I'm fitting a DIY alarm system right now in the house. And I'm doing that myself because I'm into that. And I want to make sure that we have a smart system. But what do you reckon, listeners? As another listener WhatsApping us, lots of WhatsApp messages today saying, I'm happy to do all the house chores that have to be done, but cannot stand ironing. And God bless COVID, because for almost 2 years, I did not iron a single piece for almost 2 years, because obviously this person didn't have to go out. So no need for a nicely creased shirt, right, or trouser. Absolutely. Ironing as well is another thing. Should men be doing more ironing at home? Normally that's something that women tend to do, but I mean, I'm forced to iron when I'm traveling. So if I'm traveling for work, I absolutely hate getting out the ironing board and having to have an attempt at ironing. But it's a difference as well. Sometimes I know, like, friends of mine who stayed away and stayed in accommodation when they went to university, for example, in halls for their first year or their second year or whatever. Those people often come back much more acquainted with chores, like washing the dishes, washing your own clothes, ironing, than maybe people like me who stayed at home when we went to university to save money, and didn't get to benefit from those additional insights.
But to be, I mean,
Yeah.
I stayed away from home for 5 years at university.
Wow, yeah.
And you know, you had to do all the chores there: the cooking, the cleaning, the washing
Well,
up.
did that help you?
The
Did that help
ironing.
you get more comfortable with those chores, or not?
To be honest, I don't think they've actually featured as a major point of discussion. They had to be done, and you just gone and did them. To be honest.
Yeah. But how does it work? I mean, I'll be curious to know what listeners think. 01582 481 822. How does it work in your household? Because I know it's a major contention where a lot of men have a very clear demarcation or distinction about the role that he has in the house, i.e., being the breadwinner, traditional role, and the woman being the person who takes care of the kids and makes the food and irons the clothes and stuff like that. There are still men who very strongly believe that that should be the case. And I'm wondering what people think of that and how they manage that in the society that we are in today, where to make ends meet, to pay your bills, whether it's gas, water, electricity.
Have to work, yeah.
In most households, both have to work and work as a team. But then is it fair, not fair, is it fair for then the woman to work and then also do a lot of the housework?
Well, maybe you ought to flip the question,
Go
right?
on.
So if you got family, right, and one of either the husband or the wife doesn't have a career, is it fair that they should be working?
Well, yeah. I mean,
if they've got children to look after, right, and one out of the two have got a career, basically, right.
What if they both want a career and they
that's the thing, isn't it? There's a bigger question to be had, right?
Yeah.
That in this society you are defined by what you do, right? And I think people ought to start challenging that, right? Because you are not defined by the job you do. The job you do, right, is to earn money so that you can live a life the way you want to live. So if we're saying that I'm going to go through the system, right, I'm going to become a high flyer, etc., etc., and if that defines you, well, fair enough, right? That defines you. But if you're just doing it because other people are doing it, and you haven't got the skills or the expertise, etc., but you want to pretend that you're on some sort of a path, etc., well, maybe one of you ought to say, well, family is more important, right? I want to look after the family.
I would love for some women to call in and some men to call in. 01582 481 822, because a lot of women that ask their husbands, or that maybe are looking for husbands and require of their husbands to maybe take part in some of the household chores and household work. Sometimes men call them feminists, or these are feminist women. We don't want these. I don't want this kind of woman in my life, is what I've heard people say. And I'm like, well, actually, not really. It's not an unreasonable request to ask your husband to help out, but it is a give and take situation, right? In any kind of relationship.
It is a give and take, and I think example is a Prophet ﷺ, right? He used to.
We've got 10 seconds, but we'll come back to that, Zafar, and I would love to hear your example of the Prophet ﷺ. Listeners, this is Friday Night Live. Of course, we're talking about lots of topics, including should men do more housework. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away.
Assalamu alaikum. In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
लुटन और इसके मज़ाफ़ात में नमाज इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है.
This azan has been sponsored by Ideal Properties. Contact us on 01582 721110 or log on to www.idealpropertiesltd.co.uk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Would you like to sponsor the azan? If so, give us a call on 01582 481810 or email us on info@inspirefm.org.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the fourth and final part of tonight's edition of Friday Night Live with me, Abdul Akbar, and Zafar Iqbal. Believe it or not, can you believe it's just over 2 weeks until Ramadan, mashallah.
2 weeks,
Kicks off, yeah. So Ramadan is apparently either the 10th or the 11th of March, around that time. So just over 2 weeks to go until the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan, in case you're wondering when that is, listeners. So time to start preparing for that. And one important tip.
And make sure the dates you get are Palestinian dates.
Oh yes, indeed. We have
and
to
not
support
Israeli
Gaza.
dates.
Make sure you don't get those Israeli majules. And I'm not saying that because I don't like Israelis, but I don't want to support a government that currently is conducting the actions that it's conducting. I don't want to support companies that endorse the government that are perpetrating the actions that they're perpetrating. And there are a lot of companies out there, coffee companies, chocolate companies, that do support the actions by supporting
but I think
the work they're doing.
Dates are a little bit more, how should we say, close to home, right? Because there are things that are really kind of like, from a religious perspective in Ramadan.
Definitely.
They are close to our deen in many ways.
Yeah.
And then to associate those with somebody who's actively killing Palestinians in large numbers.
Yeah, you got to check where
you got to check
where they're coming from, the origin. I would say any product, really. I think it's really not nice to see some of these companies supporting the atrocities that are happening in Palestine, especially in Gaza right now. Anyway, this is Friday Night Live. Of course, as we just mentioned, it is just over 2 weeks until Ramadan. But right now we're talking about whether men should do more housework and more household chores. And this is all on the back of actually a YouGov survey that happened not recently, a couple of years ago, where 3/4 of women say mostly or always they wash the clothes, but only 55% of men say they leave it to their partner. So there is a perception amongst men that they do more of the housework than they actually do. And that's really interesting. I'd love to hear from you on that. 01582 481 822. And I would love to know how you handle the housework in your household. And I think every household, in order for any relationship to work, whether it's a working relationship or whether it's a marital relationship or a relationship with your child or with siblings or with your parents, any relationship, it's got to be give and take. There's got to be an element where you give something and you get something in return. And in some relationships, especially when it comes to working relationships or marital relationships, when one side is giving more and the other side is only just taking, that's when things start to get difficult and challenging.
It does, to be honest. But the thing is, metering who does what, I think causes problems too.
That's true. Yeah, and that's where the element of love comes in the marriage part.
Because in our deen, right, there's an aspect called ihsan. Basically, you do things right. We do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Basically, you get reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
No, but you can't take liberties though with ihsan.
Well, you can't take liberties. But if both of them, right, did things on the basis of not, I did this for you, so therefore you do this for me.
Yeah.
That to me. So this is the reason why we say Bismillah, because we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We do this so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is because we expect reward from them. So
really good khutbah today, actually. It was in Dallow Road Community Center that I attended today. Really good khutbah by Sheikh Abdul Majid's son, mashallah. I think his name is Ibrahim. And he did a great khutbah on doing things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely, yes.
So when we do things, I am servicing my family, I'm servicing my children, I'm doing this, yes, to help my family, to help my husband or whatever, but I'm also doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as we have that in our equation, and I'm not just talking about the women, I'm talking about the men as well. Men are working for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I would say this is a remedy to a mental disease.
Yeah.
The fact that when you do things right, you're counting and you're keeping track, and it does you over.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think that only starts to happen,
this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, you do things for me in my name, right, and expect reward from me.
Yeah, but there's some men that will take advantage of that and then want everything done for them.
No, this
in the name of Allah. And it applies to both, I know, but a lot of men take advantage. And I'm saying this because I've been in mediations with men, husband and wives, where the husbands are saying, well, it's her duty to do that, brother. It's her duty.
Yeah.
And the woman's like, hang on, I know it's my duty, but you do realize I'm doing this 24/7, 7 days a week, and I need some respite.
Right,
and it's your duty as well to actually give me respite and be my garment as well. You're there to cover each other.
Right.
Another WhatsApp message has come in and said, I think it's really sad for many sisters out there who are, and he's using the word, slaving away in the kitchen, and that's quoting the WhatsApp message, especially when it comes to Ramadan, and so many even miss their Maghrib Salat when guests, etc., come and the men in the family do not help. because, oh my God, how can I possibly be seen in the kitchen? And that's an interesting thought.
There is. I guess there is a body of opinion out there, especially with youngsters, to be honest, I must say, boys who have been brought up right in the lap of their mother, who think that they're there to be served upon right by their wife after the mother's handed them over, and I think that mentality is wrong too.
Yeah,
right?
And it happens a lot in Asian households.
It does happen in Asian households.
Yeah.
Similarly, I have to say there are girls and women who are brought up with this mentality that feminism in the West is a great thing effectively, and everything is driven by the fact that I must act upon
gender equality and all that stuff.
Must act upon the feminist instinct and make sure that the husband does. So I made a cup of tea last time. It's your turn now.
Yeah.
Even though he's worked for 24 hours
Do
or
it out
whatever.
of love for each other is what I would say.
Exactly.
And love for Allah first and foremost, and then obviously love for each other.
Exactly. And it's got to be situation wise. At the end of the day, you got to work out basically, right, a situation, a way which is equitable, and both people can be happy with it.
What
right?
do you reckon, listeners? 01582 481 822. I'd love to have opinions on the radio, and I know you're listening, and we want to get more people calling into the program because we want your insights as well on these topics. We know these topics are sensitive topics, and everyone has a viewpoint on this. I'm sure that men and women listening to tonight's program, and even if you're in your teens and you're listening to tonight's program, you will have a point of view on whether or not, for example, mothers babyfy their males in their household too much, especially the boys in the household, as Zafar Saab is suggesting. I've seen that myself, where mothers, the son walks in and he's 18, 19 and says, I want chicken, or I want this and I want that. And the mother's basically at his mercy because she loves him, and she says she sees him as her beta, and I'll do anything for my beta and make sure my beta is nice and healthy. Beta could be out there clubbing at night. Beta could come home and do be doing all kinds of stuff without the foresight of the parents. But still, he is beta and he's going to be babyfied, like you said. And then beta isn't passed on to an unsuspecting spouse, poor thing. And then beta wants a similar service from the spouse. Of course, but no, Berta does
spouse is working.
Berta needs to realize that spouse is not Amaji. Yeah, spouse is spouse and has different rights. So, and spouse needs to realize that before she says yes to Berta and gets married to him, that she understands what she's getting into and the habits of the person. And spouse's parents need to understand and make sure they do the accurate vetting of said individual who may have been spoiled in these ways. So we're going into a complex topic here, Zafar Saab. And this is all on the back of the topic, should men do more housework? But it is a complex topic because it does start from home, and it starts from your upbringing. And for those of us that have children, whether they are boys or girls, and we've been blessed with children, or young siblings, we even ourselves, if we're young and in our teenage years, we do need to ask ourselves, what's good for me, or what's good for our children and their future? And we definitely need to get more of our boys being more proactive and, taking action in the household. So dads set that example. Dads need to set that example in the household because, for those fathers that have sons, the sons are going to emulate their fathers in some ways. And they need to set that example in order for their sons to follow them or their children to follow them. So, for example, a good example is prayer, just praying in the house. Right. If your kids don't see you praying, why should they pray? That's right. If your kids don't see you fasting, why should they fast? Right. And then people wonder, oh my God, beta bigger gear. I can't control him anymore because he's out of control now. Don't get to that point. And you know what I'm talking about, listeners, because I'm sure you've seen examples around you and other family members where unfortunately you have seen maybe nieces and nephews or other family members or friends where things are a little bit out of hand. It's because action wasn't taken sooner. And positive action wasn't taken sooner. And, the solution is not then your son makes a mistake and does something grossly inappropriate and then you get a stick out and beat the heck out of him. Because that was the solution in the past, right? You get the chappal out. I remember, may Allah bless her soul, with Jannah Ameen, my mother, who's passed away now. It's gonna be 5 years this Ramadan, actually. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. But this great woman, my mother, she would discipline me, and I would be targeted.
So you felt the jutta then?
I did. I remember the triple, and it was a homing missile, right? Because you're running, and it would follow you like a heat seeker. And she had a good target, mashallah. But bless my mother for that discipline, which was very traditional in nature, but it worked for that time. But I think, and what she did, that was great, is that she also gave me freedom, but also gave me the discipline. And that's an important balance that we need to strike, because I think if we're too strict on our children, then there's other problems that we create. And if we're too loose, we create problems. So it's really a balance that we have to strike. I think
and it's very difficult. And you know something, there isn't enough of the conversations out there.
Right.
There isn't enough of the material out there to assist families in coping with that. Because I've had children basically, and they've grown up. Each one is different, and each one, I guess, I've dealt with on my own devices differently. And it's like I've got the benefit of the experience, but is that passed on, or are the next generation going to start from scratch again and learn their own way? And that's the thing we see. I think it's in Malaysia they have parental training as part of the nikah.
Really?
The marriage certificate.
Wow.
They go through a period of training.
A little course,
basically, parental, on how to bring up children.
It's not a bad idea, right? I mean, some advice, some nasiyah, some best practices.
Best practices, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really important.
So when you do a project, right, you always have lessons learned.
Yeah.
Right. For the next project.
A risk register, right, and lessons learned register.
Lessons learned. That's right. Learned. So the idea for that is so that the next project that you work on or somebody else works on, they've got something to pick up basically and implement as part of the next project.
Something tells me, Zafar Saab, you've had your finger in the project management pie.
Oh, a little bit, man. A little bit. Just a little bit.
Mashallah.
Just a little. But I'm just saying that in terms of family bringing up children.
It is project management.
There is no lessons learned that being passed on, basically.
So that's interesting. You say that, and I think in some families there is, and definitely we learn from our parents and how our parents raised us and how we see. I mean, I think we're very good at picking out the mistakes of others. Oh, I wouldn't want to raise my children like her, or I wouldn't want to raise my children like him. But introspection sometimes doesn't happen enough, where we look to ourselves and say, okay, well, what can I do to make things better? But also, Zafar Saab, would you agree with me when I say that sometimes parenting really must not be something that only one parent takes care of? It's got to be a dual thing, right? Where both the husband or the mother and father both are involved. So the disciplining shouldn't just only come from the mother and the father's completely chilled, or vice versa. The father's completely disciplining out there and the mother's chilled. I think both have to toe the same line.
The key thing is that both mother and father have to be on the same page.
Right.
So you can't be in a situation where the father does a discipline and the child runs to the mother and mother says, oh dear.
I did that all the time. I did that all the time when I was growing up.
Oh dear. and the mother has to go at the husband to say why.
And they argue in front of the kids.
Why are you? It's
Does
like,
this resonate?
If it's a common position to say, right, you've done it wrong, so therefore there is a recompense for it.
And I've got to admit, I've made that mistake. I think a lot of couples make that mistake where you end up arguing in front of the children on stupid topics, right? And I'm the first to say I've made that mistake a few times in my marriage, and I've been married, subhanAllah, it's going to be 20 years this July. And I have made that mistake. But listeners, what say you? 01582 481 822. Would love to hear from listeners on their viewpoints, whether men should be doing more household chores, and any other thoughts that you have on any of the topics that Zafar Saab and I have been talking about on raising children as well, because that's a challenging topic in itself, especially when we have mobile devices. And Zafar Saab, when you and I were growing up, I grew up in the 80s, and there was no concept of a mobile device. The closest thing you had to something electronic was teletext.
A remote control for the TV.
Remote control for the TV, and then you go on teletext and you'd put in the number for the page. You'd wait a few seconds.
And it wasn't very exciting.
That was the internet back then, right? I mean, that was the internet that we had. That was, and I'm sure millennials listening to us right now will not know what teletext is, and those of you who do know what teletext is will be grinning, thinking, "Yeah, I remember that." And then you'd have to be a bit of a nerd to even invoke teletext back then. But back then, when we grew up, we didn't have a computer in our pocket.
I have to say that although I think the devices you're talking about, the iPads, the iPhones, the phones, etc. I think on the whole, I would say they are a bad thing, especially for children.
Why are they bad? What's the reason?
For children, because the way things are progressing on these devices, the children don't have time to wonder anymore. They don't have time to reflect anymore, right? It's instant gratification via messages to the friends or TikTok or YouTube video, etc. And the attention span is getting smaller and smaller, right? And I have to say, in my experience, device has negatively impacted, right, on the behavior, right, of children.
Yeah, and then it's always easy for a child.
Having said that, it's the easiest way to get the children out of your hair.
Oh my God! Yeah, I saw my niece today, and God bless her parents because they're good parents.
Yeah.
But just in front of a little mobile phone, watching YouTube for hours, and I'm like, oh my God! And this was a 3-year-old, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, we didn't have the benefit of that, Zafar. Unless we had the TV. And those Saturday morning programs that you would watch and get up and watch, or maybe the 5 o'clock CBBC or the Broom Cupboard and all that going live, and all those old programs that you would watch in the evenings and Saturdays. But today, as you mentioned, it's instant on-demand entertainment wherever you find it. And it's a short-form content.
There's no time for reflection.
To
learn.
It's just constantly being bombarded in your head.
That's right.
And it's out there to entertain you. So this guy, Mr. Beast, for example, who's the highest grossing YouTuber in the world right now, he's a 100 millionaire. He's made so much money. But if you look at the content, and he's the most popular YouTuber on the planet, and the content he creates is just nonsense. People are watching it, especially young people. I've watched some of Mr. Beast's videos, and they're quite hilarious. But you're right. It's that kind of addictive nonsense that people are watching now, and you're not getting the fulfillment that you used to get from reading a book.
Well, set aside a book.
Yeah.
I challenge you, and I challenge any other listeners there. Right, sit your child in front of a 2-hour movie, right, and you watch them to see if they see it to the end.
Yeah.
They won't be able to.
It depends on the movie, right?
No, I don't think so, right? I think past 15 minutes or 20 minutes, they've had enough. They can't concentrate that long. They want to get to they want to get to the action piece, right? You know, they
want they want the end.
They want the end.
Interesting,
right?
Yeah. My kids aren't like that though. My kids actually will happily quite sit through it as long as it's a movie that they're interested in. It's got to be something that is of their taste.
Is this a recent experience you're talking about?
I'm talking about recent experience. So we watched a new Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, Wonka.
Oh wow!
And we enjoyed that. I enjoyed that myself because I'm a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory fan. I'm a Roald Dahl fan. Even though this wasn't a Roald Dahl movie, it was based. It's the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory prequel by Timothy Chalamet. But this was something we enjoyed watching. But I do hear what you're saying, which is that young people want things faster because they're used to the instant generation, instant access.
And if it's more than 3 minutes, right, they're not interested. They want to move on.
So it's that whole thing about short form content, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and things along those lines. So as parents listening to this, and I'm sure there's a lot of parents listening to this wondering what the heck we're talking about. And Zafar, you and I work in IT, so we're familiar with this, but a lot of parents may not be technologically familiar. And that's where you have to get familiar with what your kids are up to on their devices.
That's right.
Because they could be on their devices in their bedrooms. And for example, I know my daughters who are 14 and 11, right? They all have devices, but they have parental control software on their devices that allow my wife and I to check what they're up to. But guess what? They found a way to disable that if they needed to.
That's right.
And not because they're up to malicious activity, but because they want to be able to access YouTube at a time of their choosing and not at a time of our choosing, for example. So when I discovered that, and we have a really good relationship, alhamdulillah, with our daughters in that they are honest with us. So when I ask them, have they hacked into it and how are they accessing this stuff? They go, Dad, we found a workaround. And I'm like, that reminds me of me when I was 14. So keep off the old block almost. But at least we have the trust that they can be honest with me and my wife. But you need to create that trusted environment where the children will know that, look, if I've done something wrong and I go to my parents, I'm not going to get my head kicked in, right? I'm not going to get the dunda like maybe we did in the olden days, but actually I might get a telling off, and I know I'm not going to do that again. So that trust has to be built with your children from a young age. But it's never too late if they're in their teens. It's about building trust. Is all about building that intimacy, spending time with the person, right?
Indeed. And I think that the relationship's got to be such that if they have a problem, why they come to you first.
Absolutely, not to some dude at sixth form who happens to show an interest.
Or somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's the level of the trust it's got to be, even if it's stuff, right, which is uncomfortable to talk about. They should be able to feel as though that they can talk to you
That's so important.
without getting an adverse. And that comes from.
This is turning into the parenting show.
It is the parenting.
What happened to Friday Night Live?
I don't know, man. and you're right. So it's also the reaction of the parents to them coming to you. So if you jump up and down, right, that when they come to you for something, a slight issue, whatever, jump up and down and shout and scream and all that. How dare you? This, that, and the other.
You have a negative reaction,
and they're going to think, well, okay, well, I'm not going to go to him next time.
Exactly, and that's why we need to be emotionally intelligent, right? We need to make sure we have our emotions in check, because we are examples to everyone around us, including our kids. We're the closest examples to them, and so if we're behaving in a way or reacting in a way that elicits the reaction that Zafar Sahib you're describing, then obviously they're not going to come back to you. And it's the same even at work. Like if you're a manager at work and one of your employees comes to you with a mistake they've made, and you say, all right, well, I'm not happy about that. Well, I'm going to have to do something about that. You're
going to get.
They're not going to come back to you with future mistakes. You're going to lose that trust. But if you're an approachable manager where people feel they can approach you, then you're more likely to hear about incidents that you can do something about in a very gentle way and take proactive intervention before something serious happens. And I think it's really important as parents that we do keep that proximity and relationship with our children, especially fathers. There's a really good book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. So if you're a father out there that has a daughter or more, I have 3, alhamdulillah. I from experience, I'm saying that proximity to your daughters is really important. Raising daughters is not just a woman's job. I would argue that actually it's more on the father when you have daughters than the mother, especially when they get to puberty and that age of majority, because that is when you really need to start setting examples and be that emotional line and that wall to lean on for your daughters. Because if you're not that emotional wall to lean on for your daughters when they're in their teenage years, they will find someone who is willing to be that emotional wall. And trust me, you don't want it to be that guy down the road at school or wherever they go to pass their time educationally or otherwise. You know what I mean? So listeners, it has been an interesting show, and I was hoping
it's a new experiment.
It's a new experiment. I was hoping we get more calls.
Indeed. We have to.
I know people are listening. There's thousands of people listening right now, according to our statistics. We're just not getting enough people calling, and I'd love to get more calls from listeners, friends, brothers, sisters, whoever. So listeners, next time when you hear Zafar Sahib and I talk, please do take part.
Indeed. And I think the reason we're talking, and we shouldn't be talking as much as we did today, is because we want your feedback. We want you to come in and join us.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, Jazakallah khair for all of your attention, and I hope today's show has been interesting for you. Don't forget you can call us on 01582481822 next week, that is. Until then, From me, Abdul Akbar and Zafar Iqbal Saab, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.